Honey badgers have been breaking out of zoos, systematically, deliberately, and then teaching their babies how to do it. This is not a story about an animal getting lucky. This is a story about a creature that looked at every cage humans ever built, decided it was a problem worth solving, and then solved it, every single time. The honey badger did not escape. The honey badger engineered an exit, and zookeepers around the world have been on the losing side of that equation for decades. Here is what actually happened. The honey badger, Mellivora capensis, is a small animal. It weighs about 12 kilograms on a large day. It stands roughly 30 centimeters at the shoulder. If you saw one in a field, you might not think much of it. Small, stocky, black on the bottom, silver-white on the top, like it is wearing a tiny tuxedo backwards. Cute, almost. That impression lasts exactly until the honey badger decides it has somewhere else to be. Because the honey badger is not built the way most animals are built. Its skin is extraordinarily thick and loose, so loose that a honey badger can turn almost completely around inside its own skin while being held and bite whatever is holding it. Its claws are designed for digging through compacted earth, ripping open termite mounds, and tearing into beehives without slowing down. It has been documented surviving cobra venom, porcupine quills embedded deep in its face, and bee stings by the hundreds without changing course. Pain, for a honey badger, is not a deterrent. Pain is just information. Now put that animal in a zoo enclosure, a reasonable, well-designed zoo enclosure. Concrete walls, a moat, a locked gate, overhanging lip at the top so nothing can climb out. The zookeeper looks at that setup and thinks, contained. The honey badger looks at that setup and thinks, first draft. The most documented case of systematic honey badger escape behavior comes from Moholoholo Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in South Africa, where a honey badger named Stoffel became so famous for escaping that he is now considered something like a legend in animal behavior circles. Stoffel did not escape once. Stoffel escaped constantly, and each time the enclosure was upgraded, Stoffel found the new weakness within days. When the walls were smooth concrete, Stoffel collected rocks and rolled them to the base of the wall, stacked them, climbed them, went over. When the rocks were removed, Stoffel found a dead tree in the enclosure, dragged it to the wall, propped it against the surface, and climbed it like a ladder. When the tree was removed, Stoffel started building. He raked mud and debris into a ramp with his forepaws, methodically, in one corner, until the ramp was high enough that he could scramble over the lip. The keepers raised the wall. Stoffel raked a bigger ramp. This went on for years. And here is where the story shifts from impressive to genuinely unsettling. Stoffel was eventually paired with a female honey badger. Her name was Hamadryad. Within weeks, Stoffel had shown Hamadryad every method he knew. She watched. She learned. She began executing the same escape sequences independently. A behavior that one animal had developed through trial and error over years was transmitted to a second animal in weeks. That is not instinct. That is teaching. That is the transfer of learned problem-solving across individuals, and it did not stop there. When Stoffel and Hamadryad had young, the escape methods did not disappear from the next generation. The cubs watched. The cubs practiced. The cubs left when they felt like it. What started as one animal's ingenuity had become, within a single generation, something that looked very much like a tradition. A cultural behavior, passed down. Now understand what that means. Most animals in captivity, when they escape, do so accidentally or opportunistically. A gate left unlatched, a fence degraded, a moment of distraction. They do not plan, they do not iterate, they do not remember that the last method failed and build on the failure. Honey badgers do. The documented behavior at Moholoholo is not an isolated quirk of one exceptional individual. Honey badger escapes from enclosures have been reported from zoos across sub-Saharan Africa, from facilities in India, from wildlife sanctuaries in the United Kingdom. In nearly every case, the pattern is the same. The animal surveys the enclosure. The animal identifies a weak point or creates a structural advantage. The animal attempts. The animal fails. The animal modifies the approach. The animal succeeds. That sequence is the definition of problem solving, not instinct, not luck, a goal, an obstacle, an iterative solution. In the wild, this same intelligence plays out constantly. Honey badgers in the Kalahari have been filmed following honey guide birds to beehive locations, then using their claws to rip the hive open, then retreating to let the smoke drive the bees away before returning to feed. They remember the locations of prey animals that have gone underground. They have been observed using sticks to prop open holes they are digging into so the entrance does not collapse. They cache food. They return to it. They solve the same foraging problem in different ways depending on terrain, season, and what tools happen to be available. The IUCN recognizes the honey badger's range across approximately 60 countries, spanning African savanna, Middle Eastern desert, and South Asian forest, which means this animal has been adapting its problem-solving to radically different environments for a very long time. The brain behind all of this is relatively large for the animal's body size. The honey badger has a high encephalization quotient, meaning its brain is bigger than you would predict for a mammal of its mass, in the same range as many animals we already consider highly intelligent. It has been compared, in terms of relative brain development, to animals like wolverines and some members of the weasel family, Mustelidae, a group that consistently outperforms expectations on cognitive tasks. But raw brain size only explains the capacity. What built the behavior was pressure. Honey badgers are dietary generalists, which means they eat almost anything, which means they constantly encounter novel food sources that require novel solutions. They eat roots, scorpions, tortoises, birds, eggs, snakes, fruit, and anything a beehive contains. None of those things give themselves up easily. Every meal is a puzzle. Every foraging trip trains the same cognitive muscle. Over thousands of generations, the honey badger's survival strategy became encounter obstacle, solve obstacle, remember solution, apply solution to next obstacle. That is the same mental habit that, when applied to a zoo enclosure, produces Stoffel raking mud into a ramp at 2 in the morning. And when that same habit is passed to cubs, when the solution is watched and copied and refined by the next generation, it becomes something that no enclosure designer has ever fully accounted for. Zoos do not build cages to contain a learning animal that teaches. They build cages to contain a fixed behavioral profile. The honey badger's behavioral profile is not fixed. It updates. The zookeepers at Moholoholo eventually had to strip Stoffel's enclosure down to near bare concrete, removing almost every object that could be manipulated, stacked, dragged, or used as a tool. And even then, Stoffel found the seam where 2 concrete sections met, where there was a barely perceptible texture difference, and used it as a grip point to attempt a vertical climb. He did not succeed that time, but he tried the next day, and the day after. He was gathering data. There is a broader point here that sits underneath all the individual escapes, all the clever ramp building, all the passed-down techniques. We have spent a very long time assuming that cognitive sophistication scales with size, with social complexity, with the animals we already decided were smart: primates, cetaceans, corvids, the usual list. The honey badger is not on that list. It is a small, aggressive, solitary mustelid that lives in places humans do not go, eating things humans do not want, and attracting almost none of the research attention that elephants and dolphins receive. But it is doing, quietly and methodically, the same cognitive work. Planning ahead, using objects as tools, learning from failure, teaching its young, adjusting strategy when the environment changes, running, in other words, the same basic cognitive software that we associate with intelligence inside a body small enough to fit in a backpack. And it has been doing this not in a laboratory, not under experimental conditions, but in the real world, against real obstacles, because its survival required it. The honey badger did not develop these abilities to impress anyone. It developed them because the world it lives in never stopped presenting new problems, and the honey badger never stopped solving them. Which brings us back to where we started. Honey badgers have been systematically breaking out of every zoo that holds them, not because they got lucky, not because the cages were poorly built, because the honey badger looked at the cage, identified the problem, built the solution, and then handed the solution to its children so they would not have to start from scratch. The cage was always the easy part. The animal inside it was the variable no one planned for.